And what happens is the mechanic has to go in and change the maybe shave down parts of the thing in there, whatever, to allow the parts to move freely of each other without causing friction. Or else the engine blows up. As we blow up, if we don't change our attitude to, you know what it's like to start building that case against somebody, your boss or fellow worker, your wife or girlfriend or boyfriend or husband. You start building that case, and then all of a sudden they'll do one little thing, and they'll get an emotional response that's so inappropriate because it's the emotional response of the last 30 things you kept score on, right? And they're standing, you're a raving maniac, and all they did was leave their coffee cup on the chair somehow or something. They're standing there looking at you like, oh, you need meds. Oh, yes. You need meds. Because you go crazy. And that's because alcohol, we store stuff. And our emotional response is never the emotional response to reality right now. It's to the last year. It's to the last 6 months. That's why we must continue to watch for this stuff, because it owns us after a while. And it makes us into the person, it owns us, and it starts to dominate our actions until it will make you into the person that even you don't like. And when an alcoholic gets to a place where I don't like me, then I'm the most prone to go out in the garden and eat worms, which is to go get a fifth of whiskey. So I must keep clean. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. And these are the 10-step promises. I'll tell you, everybody, the 9-step promises get a lot of notoriety in Alcoholics Anonymous, and they're great. We'll know a new freedom and a new happiness, and we'll not regret the great stuff. But it's the 10-step promises that I came to Alcoholics Anonymous for. If without the fulfillment of the 10-step promises, I'm going to die of alcoholism. Because it's not until here, at this place in this process, that I am given and granted what I came here to get. Freedom. Freedom from something I could not get free from. It says, and we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol, for by this time sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally. And we will find that this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude towards liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. Given us. That is the definition of grace, a free, unmerited gift. That this has been given us because by now we have opened a channel to a hidden inner source of power. As it says on page 55, the great reality deep down within us. And we're starting to get a flow and an infusion of grace, which is our free gift. And this puts us in this safe place, this grace. It just comes. That is the miracle of it. All we've done is open the channel. The grace is automatic. It's automatic. You don't have to go looking for it. You just have to clear away the stuff that's been blocking it. The resentments, the fears, the anxiety, the worries, all the crap that keeps you self-consumed. And you will open the channel. We are not fighting it. Neither are we avoiding temptation. We don't avoid temptation. As a matter of fact, we don't even quit drinking. I mean, if A wanted you to quit drinking, there'd be somewhere in the book it'd say, okay, quit, cut that out, stop that. It doesn't even say that. Matter of fact, there's a couple places in there that tell you, well, if you're not sure, go drink. Go try it. Try to control it. See how you do. How's that working for you? We're not trying to get anybody to quit drinking. We're trying to treat alcoholism, and if you treat the alcoholism, you won't drink. It's cause and effect. Dr. Paul one time he's telling his story. He said the funniest thing I ever heard. One time he talked about all the times he quit drinking and how he always ended up drunker than ever. And he finally said the funniest thing I ever heard. He said, "This quitting drinking's killing me." And it was true. The quitting drinking was killing me. Because I kept failing, and it would always be a bigger explosion than ever. Because I don't have the power. Lack of power is my dilemma. And I love this line. It says, we feel as though we had been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. Oh yeah. Neutrality is when you put a car in neutral, the engine can spin up to 10,000 RPMs and you ain't going nowhere. It don't move you a bit. And I can be surrounded by alcohol. I can be surrounded by people who drink. I can work around alcohol. I could have alcohol in my house. And I'm in neutral. It doesn't move me a bit. Because of God's grace. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky, nor are we afraid. This is not about becoming a reformed drinker. We're not reformed drinkers. If we're reformed drinkers, there's something wrong. This is something beyond anything we could imagine. It's real freedom. Real freedom. The problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience. That is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. And that's the deal. If I don't do certain things in my life, I will no longer be in a position of neutrality. And then I'll be back to the guy that I'm not drinking, I'm not drinking, I'm not drinking, I'm not drinking. But if I do this thing, I'll be in that safe and protected place. And what a tremendous, a miraculous, it says it's the miracle of it. It's a miraculous promise for those of us that have been in the grip of this deadly obsession for the ease and comfort we'd once found in taking a few drinks. An obsession with the effects of alcohol that even in the face of overwhelming evidence that it's killing us, we can't seem to shake this obsession with the effect we'd once found. To be that free. I've been going to H&I meetings, that's hospitals and institution meetings, non-stop for my whole sobriety. At least twice a week I go. And years ago, I used to make a statement in this one detox that was absolutely true. But I had to stop making it because I'd lose half the room or more. And what the statement was is that if you throw yourself into Alcoholics Anonymous and you implement the process in this book in your life, that there will come a time where you can be alone in a room with an unlimited amount of your drug of choice, and it will mean no more to you than the furniture. And I'd say that, and that's absolutely true, and the eyes in the room would glaze over. like I'm from Pluto or something, you know. Like I'd lose everybody when I'd say that, because that is inconceivable to them. Now, they can't imagine that. Especially the cocaine addicts, they just go, oh. They can't imagine that. But alcoholics who have cocaine problems, and I don't know about drug addiction, but I know about people with alcoholism who also used a lot of cocaine, or people with alcoholism who, like Dr. Bob, who took sedatives every day of his life for 17 years, or have other drug problems, that you will be placed in a position of neutrality for all of it. For all of it. And that is our experience. I've worked around alcohol from the time I was about a year sober, up until last year. I had it in my home. I'll tell you a funny story. If you're new, this will make you crazy. For between 8 and 10 years, through my business, we started a society called the Las Vegas Food and Wine Society. And for over 8 years, almost 10 years, I would go to monthly wine tastings, and I would put them on. And I remember when I first started doing it, I thought I was a little paranoid and anxious about the people that are going to notice I don't drink, right? I'll tell you, in all those years, no one ever noticed that I didn't drink. They didn't even know. And I'm so self-centered, I think, oh, they're all going to watch me, you know. They don't even notice. Nobody made a comment. Nobody ever, because I'm giving the talks and I'm helping pour wine for the people. They never noticed that I didn't drink. And I was able to be around it every day of my life. And I'm telling you, it meant no more to me than the furniture. And I'm going to tell you that something else, that is not me. I'm the guy that if you let me stay on your couch when you went to bed, I'm telling you, if there was a bottle of whiskey hidden anywhere in that house, when you go to bed, I'm going to find it. You know what I'm saying? I've tiptoed through people's bedrooms looking for their stash and stuff in their medicine cabinets and stuff. I've done all of that. To be as free as what I've become in Alcoholics Anonymous is a tremendous miracle. It's unbelievable. It's so unbelievable that if you haven't received this gift and infusion of grace and you hear me talking about it, you're going to think the first thing you're going to think is, yeah, but I'm not like you. Do the work. It will happen. It doesn't matter if you believe it will happen. I'm telling you, it'll happen. You can go down to New Zealand and you can grab one of those aborigines that live out in the bush that has never seen electric lights. He's never seen modern conveniences. You could bring him into this room when it's dark and you could show him the light switch and you could explain to him in his native language that if he pushes this button, the room will light up like daylight, and he's not going to believe you. But it doesn't matter whether he believes you or not. If he pushes the button, he gets the results. This is spiritual physics here. This is almost like a spiritual science. You do this work, you'll get these results. That's it. You don't have to believe in it. It's all cause and effect. This is not mysterious rocket science or mysticism. This is actual cause and effect. And this has been true not just for me, and not just the people who wrote this book, but this has been true for thousands and millions of people who have done the work. They've gotten the results. And the funny thing about AA is almost universally we do this stuff out of desperation, not believing it would work. We can't imagine it would work. And that is almost the universal experience. And we don't believe it works until after it works. And then we go, oh yeah, that works. But we didn't think it was going to work. No, I mean, come on. What newcomer ends up in a detox thinking, oh, God's going to really change my life? I mean, nobody thinks that. Really? I mean, why would you? There's nothing in your experience. This has not been a friendly universe to you up until that point. I mean, why would it become a friendly universe? It's outside your experience. But you do the work, you'll get the results. It's that simple. It's that simple. And if you don't do the work, you won't get the results. Unfortunately. I wish that you could get it just from, as they say, from osmosis. You may get the desire to do the work from osmosis. But just sitting in a room, it doesn't give you a spiritual experience. Sitting in a chicken coop doesn't make you a chicken. You got to do this work. This is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. And I think there's an ebb and flow of fit spiritual condition for most of us. There are days when I'm so spiritually fit I need a tent and a tambourine. You know what I mean? I'm crazy. And then there are other days where I feel desolate, where I feel lost, where my conscious contact with God is no longer conscious. It's unconscious. It becomes theoretical. I feel desolate. I feel disconnected. And I think that there's a certain movement to the Spirit, almost like the seasons of the year. I think it's only a self-centered alcoholic of my type that would secretly suspect I should be plugged in 24/7, 365 days of the year, that I should be turned on spiritually all the time. But I don't think life's like that. There's movements of the Spirit, just as there's seasons of the year. And sometimes I feel alive and bursting with connectedness, and other times I feel desolate and kind of removed. And it's my job to continue this process when I feel really connected and when I feel just vaguely connected. It doesn't matter. The word spiritual, if you take off the first two letters, you get the word ritual. And it is the steps 10, 11, and 12 are the ritual of Alcoholics Anonymous. We do this stuff when we feel like it. We do this stuff when we don't feel like it. And it stabilizes our life. You stop doing it and your life gets unstable. And that is my weakest area over the years. And it's only been in the last couple of years that I start to feel like I'm getting a little more disciplined with step 10, 11. But those have been my weakest areas. And because I'm lazy, I'm the kind of guy that if I'm not really disturbed when I take a daily inventory and I look to see where I was selfish, dishonest, afraid, etc., etc., if I'm not real disturbed and uncomfortable, I don't look very close, right? And I'll just go to bed at night when I'm doing that, as if I hadn't been afraid all day, or selfish or self-centered all day, or dishonest. I mean, really, could you imagine a day when there was no self-centeredness or selfishness the whole day? We weren't worried and concerned with yourself all day. I mean, where's the lobotomy scars? I mean, to be that way. I mean, you couldn't do that. There's no day like that. There's never been a day since I've been born where I haven't had selfishness, and to some degree. I may keep it covered up. It may not be noticeable to you. But I've always had that. So what happens is, as I let stuff slip through the cracks, it starts to alter my spirit. And I start to get a little bit blocked and a little blockage. It's almost like how you get a blockage of the arteries from plaque and cholesterol buildup. It doesn't just block your artery. It just builds up slowly and starts to constrict the flow of blood slowly and slowly and slowly. And that's how spiritual disease is. I start to block the channel and I start to constrict the channel between me and God. Until all of a sudden there's a friction going on in my life and the water starts to heat up and boil. And I think most of us are like tea bags. We work a lot better in hot water. A lot better. So then you get real busy, and then I'm calling my sponsor a lot. Then I'm really getting transparent with my sponsor now, and because I've created a sickness in my heart that is starting to. It's like a stone in my shoe. I got to get rid of this thing. And then what happens is I get rid of it and I get free. And it's like, okay, this is good. This is good. God's there. I can feel Him. Everything's cool. And except that guy over there, boy, is he an idiot. And it just starts again, right? It just starts again. And it's just start constricting the little flow of power a little bit more and more and more. And it's just the way it is, It don't make us bad people. It is our nature to do that. That's why this is a chronic illness. It's not an acute illness. We can't fix this once and for all and we're done. It's a way of life. It's a maintenance. And it's a good life. So it warns us in this next paragraph. It says, it's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. I'm telling you, it's easy. One of the things, the downsides of AA is that recovery through the 12 steps has good news and bad news. The good news, you work these steps, your life gets better, you feel better, you're more successful, you're more connected, it's better. The bad news is if you work the steps, you feel better, your life gets better, and it's better. And that's bad news because it's so human of us that when our life gets good and we start to feel good, we start to lose the motivation that drove us to take the actions that made our life better. And if this was an acute illness, you could get away with that because the healing is done once and for all. But it's a chronic illness and you lose your motivation for doing the work, and all of a sudden you start to get ill again. And the problem with me getting sick is that most of the time, because I got the mind of a chronic alcoholic, I don't know that I'm getting sick. What often happens to me as I start to get sick, it looks like the people around me are getting sick. It looks like there's a lot of selfish people in the world. It looks like there's a lot of controlling people in the world. It looks like there's a lot of people that just don't get it, that are really wrong, that need to be straightened out. And it's me. So when they say it's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels, they're not kidding. That's the second delusion it talks about in chapter 3. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently maybe. It is so easy to get seduced by the fruits of your own recovery into a false sense of okayness. You know, how alcoholic can I be? I haven't thought about drinking in 10 years. I got money in the bank. My bills are paid. I got respect. I feel good. There's no problems in my life. How alcoholic could I be, really? Very alcoholic. Very alcoholic. And if I act from that position, I will find out really in no time at all how alcoholic I actually am. Right? I'll find out. It's coming. This disease is a disease that demands treatment. Demands it. And you're going to treat this disease one way or another. And if you don't treat it with this process, you will eventually try to treat it with alcohol and drugs. But it demands. It is like an itch that we are compelled to scratch one way or another. And it's not even a judgment about alcohol. If alcohol would effectively scratch the itch like it did when I was 20 years old, I'm telling you, I'd be scratching it with alcohol. The reason I'm forced to the table in Alcoholics Anonymous is it didn't work anymore. It was killing me, and it was desolate, and it didn't plug me in and do for me what I needed to have done. So I'm forced here from a lack of alternatives. So it's easy. We are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. How can I best serve Thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. I think that this is what they mean when they say one day at a time. I know that it's more been transformed over the years into a more common expression. You don't drink one day at a time. But that's not really it. Not in the big picture. If you're 10 years sober and your abstinence from alcohol is, I'm not drinking today, goddammit, and you're just still at that place, there's something wrong there. But I think what happens is that we do this, we daily maintenance of my spiritual condition. And spiritually maintained people don't drink. You just don't. You don't have to, you're not fighting it. I don't fight alcohol. I can't even tell you how long it's been since I had to consciously say, I'm thinking of drinking. I need to take some, 20 years, I have no idea. I don't even remember the last time. But I can tell you yesterday or the day before, I fight alcoholism all the time. I fight the selfishness and the self-centeredness and the fear and the judgments and the playing God and all that stuff. That is a current thing that I deal with in my life. And I deal with that. And I don't do it perfect. No, nobody does. I do it haltingly, and I do it sometimes a bit less than I know I should and all that other stuff. But I do it. I do some of it. And I do it just enough that alcohol is no longer a problem for me. But if I let up, I'm cooked. I'm done. It will come back. Why do you think people who are sober 25 years, who you can talk to them one day, and from talking to them, you know they're never going to drink again, and 2 weeks later they're drunk? What happens? What's that about? I go to a Skid Row detox twice a week. And I tell you, between the detox and the other places I go, I'm telling you, there's not a week that goes by that I don't run into at least one person that was sober over 10 years that drank again. And it's always this. It's always they let up on their spiritual program of action and rested on their laurels. It's always the same thing. They haven't worked with a newcomer in a long time. They haven't really used their sponsor or taken inventory. Their connection with God was, now they were going to church and it's very ritualistic and hypothetical. But there's no conscious flow. There's nothing real in here anymore. There's no newcomers on their life. You say things. I had a conversation with a guy right before he drank again. He was sober about 15, 16 years. And he drank a couple months after I talked to him. Because I knew he was in trouble. I could tell by watching him. And he was starting to get a little antsy and depressed and uptight. And I said, why don't you work with some newcomers or get more back involved in meetings or do an inventory or something. You know what he said to me? He said, I've done all that. This week, have you? I mean, what would you say? What would you say to a diabetic that was dying of diabetes, and you tell him you need to do your insulin? He says, "Oh, I've done that a couple months ago. I did insulin." He'd say, "You're nuts," and that's crazy. That's self-delusion. The book. I love the book uses the term queer mental twists. We just take reality and just do something with it. And all of a sudden, it makes sense to us. Anybody else is looking at us like you're out of your mind. It makes sense to us. Left unchecked. That's one of the reasons I have a sponsor. And my sponsor is a big part of my 10th step. Big part. Because I don't trust my ability to check out myself. I tell you, and I've been doing this. I'm not an old timer, but I'm kind of a middle timer, I guess. 26 years, I'm a middle guy. I've been doing this for a while, and I have just as great of a propensity for self-delusion as I did when I was new. I can catch myself more often because I get it that this is familiar territory. Oh yeah, I've thought like this before. Yeah, but I still can do that to me, and I check stuff out with my sponsor. I'll tell you a great reason, as great not having a sponsor story is the story of Jim Jones. When I first got sober, Jim Jones was in the news a lot around that time, and what Jim Jones was is Jim Jones, I believe, was an alcoholic. I believe he was a guy he'd had a problem with drugs and alcohol as a kid. He'd been in some trouble, and he had a born again conversion experience, not too unlike the one that Bill Wilson had. Not too like the one that a lot of people have. And Jim Jones got sober. He got a calling to go in the ministry, and he became a minister. And for a number of years and for a period of time, he did a lot of good work. I think he was very plugged in at one time. I think he was down in the inner city, and he was helping the poor people down there. He was doing a lot of good stuff. But Jim Jones had no one to check out his vision of God's will against except the mind of a chronic alcoholic. And subtly, slowly, incrementally, he got more and more moving away from being surrendered to God into playing God. Slowly. And I bet you all along the journey, he never knew it was happening. And he had no sponsor. He had no one to check out what's going on against. I mean, really, if he'd had a sponsor, at the very least, his sponsor would have said, Jim, the Kool-Aid's a bad idea. I mean, right, I mean, really. But they drank that poison Kool-Aid I met a guy that was in the cleanup crew there. And thousands of dead bodies they found there. Thousands of people died. They committed suicide. Jim Jones committed suicide. And the crazy thing is he did that thinking he was doing God's will. Now some of you sit there and go, well, that guy was nuts. I'd never get like that. Well, go unchecked for about 2 years, just you and your thinking. And I'm telling you, if you're like me, the most bizarre things in the world will start to make sense to you, especially if there's an element of ego satisfaction or self-gratification involved. You will bend reality around that stuff and it'll start to make sense to you. And I am very painfully aware of my ability to delude myself. And so I do step 10. I check it with a sponsor. I tell the guys I sponsor, if you get inspiration from God, call me. If it's big inspiration, you better come and see me. Right? Okay. I'm a little... I think it's good to be suspect of being divinely inspired. I think it's a good suspect. And you may be. And at times we are. At times we are. At times God will move through me and give me ideas and things. But I check that stuff with my sponsor before I make these decisions in my life. Important stuff. Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power, the great reality deep down within us. If we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we have become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense. But we must go further, and that means more action. Step 11 in italics. So this is the section on step 11. There's a lot of misconceptions about step 11 in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was one who had many misconceptions about it. Being raised a child of the 70s and the late 60s, and I've tried yoga and transcendental meditation, and I chanted Namne Yoho Renge Kyo with the Buddhists, and I know about meditation, I think. So I think I know what to do. I don't really have to do what it says on these next couple pages, because I already know. I just know stuff. You know the kind of guy I am? I'm the kind of guy, if I buy something that has to be assembled, the first thing I do is throw away the directions, because I know stuff, right? I know, right? I do that driving. I'll get lost I'll go to I'll drive down to California to a town to speak that I've never been to before, and I almost have to be desolate and starving before I'll ask for directions, It's just the way I am. And so I do that with step 11. I never follow the directions, and I just make up my own little world around what I think step 11 is, right? There's very precise and concrete directions in this book. And they're confusing. They're very confusing. And they don't I don't know an alcoholic yet that what it says in here matches up with your preconceived notions of what it should say. Now check this out. Now I'll tell you, we'll see how confusing some of this stuff is. It says step 11 suggests prayer meditation. We shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. Better men than we are using it constantly. It works if we have the proper attitude and work at it. It would be easy to be vague about this matter of step 11, this matter of prayer meditation. It'd be easy to be vague, yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions. Definite and valuable suggestions, or directions, really. Remember that they changed the word direction in a lot of the book to the word suggestion. But originally this was set down as directions. In the original manuscript, Bill wrote all of this as a set of directions. So he's really saying we believe we can make some definite and valuable directions. And then, now, this is so confusing because he's going to give us some definite and valuable suggestions about prayer meditation, about step 11. Okay? And here's what he says. Now, see if this isn't confusing to you. When we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? Do we owe an apology? Have we kept something to ourselves which should have been discussed with another person at once? Were we kind and loving towards all? I mean, that doesn't track for me. To me, that sounds more like inventory. And I thought maybe this is a misprint. Maybe this paragraph should have been on the other page. And then at the bottom of the page, on awakening, we ask God to direct our thinking. Well, that's a prayer. So that sounds it doesn't really sound what I thought prayer and meditation should be talked about, but it sounds a little closer. It doesn't give you anything to chant, or doesn't walk you through some kind of directed meditation or anything. It doesn't, the stuff that I learned growing up, but at least it's closer. Why are they doing this? Why are they talking about inventory? There's a passage in the 12 by 12. And Bill says something in here that all of a sudden makes it all make sense. It's on page 98. And he talks about these things, this self-examination of step 10. He talks about the prayer and meditation. He says there is a direct linkage among self-examination, meditation, and prayer. Taken separately, which I think most of us try to do, as if these are separate steps, separate functions, things that we should take separately. He says, if taken separately, these practices can bring much relief and benefit. But when they are logically related and interwoven, the result is an unshakable foundation for life. Logically related and interwoven. There's a big difference between relief and an unshakable foundation for life. There's a lot of things you can do and learn and tricks you can do in Alcoholics Anonymous for relief. There's a whole book out that's relief-oriented. It's called Living Sober. What it really is it's not the steps. It doesn't show you how to get freedom. It doesn't show you how to get God's grace in your life. It's about tricks to not take the first drink. Little exercises. And they're fine when you're new to get a foothold here until you get to a place where you start to apply these principles. But there's a big difference between relief and freedom. Big difference. And I must have the freedom that it talks about in the 10th step promises. I have to have that. I have to have that infusion of grace, so I become the guy that's free, that's in a position of neutrality. So what they're doing here is they're showing me how to combine step 10 and 11, because within step 11 is step 10. It's not a separate thing. I must take the inventory in order to clear the channel to set my course on the vision of God's will for me. What it's like, it's very much like the process that sailors go through. If you were to go, see up here, I don't know where you'd call it, would be the port, Victoria, Vancouver Island, I suppose. And you were to go to Vancouver Island and you were to buy the finest sailboat money could buy. And it had everything in it you needed. And you went to the nautical library and you were to study these charts meticulously with the goal in mind of sailing from Vancouver to the island of Maui. You could have the perfect boat and set the perfect course. And it doesn't matter how perfect your boat is, and it doesn't matter how you've done the first 9 steps of navigation and study and setting that course. It's just going to come to pass that every single day, the winds and the tides and the currents are going to move you gradually off that course. It's not because you have a bad boat. It's not because you played with your tiller too much. It's none of that. It's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. It's not, and so what if you have to do to survive is every single day you get out your equipment, your sextant and compass and all the navigational equipment that sailors do, and you take an honest inventory of where you are. You can't fool yourself about values. And you take an honest inventory, you look at how much off the course you've gotten from going to your destination, which really is the decision, carrying out the decision we made in step 3. And you see how off course you've gotten by the winds and the tides and the currents and the self-centeredness and the fear and the etc., etc. So that you can realign your course back to your goal, carrying out the decision in step 3 to the island of Maui, so that you will keep going where you need to go. And if a sailor doesn't do that, what happens is in no time at all, he's on his way to Maui, and he's up on the deck and he's seeing these chunks of ice come by with penguins on it. And it's funny that they have penguins in Maui. Never would have imagined that. And you try to have to bend reality around it. Oh yeah, Maui has penguins. I remember that. Yes. Yeah, I think they breed with the seagulls. And what happens is you get so lost you can't come back. And I see that. I've seen that over the years. Guys who don't work these steps, and people who had worked them at one time, and they get so lost that they can't come back. I saw a guy that he hadn't been to a meeting or worked with a sponsor or a newcomer or done step 10, 11, 12 for a long time, and his life fell apart. It fell apart. And some awful things had happened in his life, and he was panicked, and he ran to a meeting, and he threw the stuff out on the table wanting help. Now he doesn't have a sponsor anymore. And if you've ever gone with a problem to an AA discussion meeting asking for advice, it's like, oh my God, it's like trying to get a drink of water from a fire hose. I mean, you sit there and everybody in the meeting starts just hammering, with advice. And he bolted out of the meeting. He couldn't take it anymore. Right? And he's got too many judgments. By this time, it's too late. He's so disconnected. He's got judgments. And when you're really sick of spirit and you're really entrenched in yourself, and you get sick enough, you're beyond human aid, you're beyond even divine intervention, because your defense mechanisms shoot down every bit of advice people will give you.